Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Electric cars appear to be coming, and some states and some countries have actually said that by a certain date they're going to stop selling gasoline-powered cars, and electric cars are going to eventually take over the roads. And that appears to be the way that even the car companies are thinking now. So, interestingly enough, Keith and several other people sent me the story that General Motors has been dragged kicking and screaming into the field of electric cars. And I've had several people say, Steve, you understand that they put up the EV1 a few years ago, and they did build an electric car, and it kind of fell by the wayside. Yeah, I'm aware of that. There's a very good documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car? And it's interesting, and it might be they were just simply so far ahead of the time on that one that it didn't happen. But point is that they were not exactly, excited about electric cars now, but they're coming around. So Cadillac is one of the interesting points in the story, because out of the Detroit News, Kalia Hall and Brianna Noble wrote the story. Some Cadillac dealers are choosing not to invest for the EV future. So about 150 Cadillac dealers are choosing to take buyouts from General Motors rather than invest thousands to support electric vehicles, according to Wall Street Journal. So what's happened is Cadillac, a division of General Motors, has contacted its dealers and said, we are going to shift over to electric vehicles. And so when that shift takes place, you're going to have to be in a position to not just sell them, but service them. And to service them, you have to put up some money to upgrade your facilities. And it's going to cost a lot of money. So you have a choice. You can agree to this and upgrade at expense to you, or we can just cut you a check and you can basically walk away from the Cadillac franchise. And 150 dealers actually said they'd do that instead. There are 880 U.S. Cadillac dealers right now. They were told in September that the transition to electric was going to cost about $200,000 per dealership. And the dealer network had until November 30th to make the decision if they wanted to take the buyout. About 17% of the Cadillac dealers took the buyout, according to the Wall Street Journal, and they're reporting based on anonymous sources. Cadillac, of course, is GM's flagship brand, and it's going to become their flagship electric brand, aiming to sell more vehicles powered by electricity than by fossil fuels by the end of the decade. The electric Lyriq crossover will kick off the transition, arriving in the first quarter of 2022, 9 months ahead of schedule. Cadillac will have a very exciting and comprehensive EV portfolio moving forward, as demonstrated by the initial reveal of the Lyriq. The vice president of Cadillac Sales, Service, and Marketing said in a statement. His name is Rory Harvey. This forward product offering needs to be combined with exceptional customer service. The future dealer requirements are a logical and necessary next step on our path towards electrification to ensure our dealers are prepared to provide customers an exceptional experience. We see Cadillac's dealer network as a business advantage, and they will remain a critical part of the retail and relationship chain with customers. The buyout could be anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, and that's according to the Automotive News. So your choice was you can give up the franchise and get a check for six figures, or keep the franchise and cut us a check for a couple $100,000. Most of the dealers opting for the buyout are smaller volume operations. There are still some discussions taking place with some dealers, but Cadillac spokesperson said, we hope to wrap this up by the end of the year. The chairman of the Cadillac National Dealer Council, an executive manager at 4 Cadillac dealers, says the organization approached GM about the transition to electric vehicles. We said you have 900 Cadillac dealers, some of whom are in more rural areas that may not share the vision with you. We asked that they meet with dealers, explain what the future looks like, and if they chose not to be on board, be able to exit the business gracefully. And that's a graceful exit where they cut you a check and say, there you go. Cadillac reached out to every dealer to talk about the buyout, but they did not know what exactly the offer was, though he said it was well north of the roughly $100,000 the company offered a number of years ago in a similar offer. So it's not the first time they've done this, apparently. The investment that GM is asking for would cover charging stations, employee training, and lifts that can carry the heavy batteries powering the vehicles. Electric vehicles are really a part of the future, he said. It's just a question of how quickly the adoption rate is. Regardless, it's still coming. We are prepared to jump on the future. Meanwhile, not every Cadillac dealer is taking the buyout. Some of them are looking forward to this. One dealer in California that has 4 Cadillac dealers says he's opting in for the brand's profitability because of its full line of SUVs and because California is requiring dealers to only sell new zero-emission vehicles by 2035 anyway. So it's kind of like, it's coming. We'll deal with it. For small dealers selling under 75 or 50 cars a year, it won't make sense to them, he said, about making the tens of thousands of dollars in investments. It's not anything that other manufacturers aren't requiring. They did the same thing. Volkswagen, Infiniti, they're all requiring the same. It's nothing crazy. You have to change. And I'd be interested to know one thing about Cadillac and how they fit in this picture, because different people in different demographic groups drive their cars differently. And so I suspect that there are Cadillacs out there that are not driven huge distances the way a Chevrolet might be. And I'm speaking in the broadest of generalities here. And so I know that when you talk about what certain car buyers are looking for, a person who's buying a Cadillac is looking for something different than what a person who's buying a Chevrolet is looking for, to stick with General Motors products. So if you were going to, deliver pizzas, okay, you'd probably rather do it in the Chevrolet than the Cadillac, assuming you have to pay for the Cadillac. And, there are going to be things like that. But one of the things that interests me, and I have to think now, turbine car? Yes, turbine car. When I wrote the book about the Chrysler turbine car, Chrysler actually put turbine engines in 7 or 8 different types of cars. And that's the most famous of the turbine cars. They put a fleet of those on the road in 1963. And I've driven a couple of those. They're very cool cars. And there were turbines that came out before that, turbines that came out after that. And the last generation turbine was put into a fairly large car. And at one point in time, when they were discussing how to market the turbines, a problem they ran into is the turbine engine would be really, really expensive to manufacture. Very, very expensive. It would clearly be the most expensive part of the car and off the charts compared to what a typical engine of that time would cost. It wasn't even a matter of 10 times, it was more like 100 times. It was insane. So they're trying to figure out ways to make it work that would make sense. And somebody said, you know something, if the engine's expensive, if you put it into an expensive car, it makes more sense than putting it in a small car like that. So what if we put it in a larger, more expensive car? And as they sat around and brainstormed this idea, several people from marketing said there's actually a few other things that make sense about this. Because if you look at the bigger, more expensive cars, one of the things that they often look at when you're car shopping for a bigger, more expensive car like that is you want a car that is quieter, runs smoother. These are the things you're paying for, right? So if you're willing to spend money to get the bigger, quieter car, then a turbine engine actually makes sense because, among other things, it ran really smoothly, really, really smoothly. And so they actually put some serious consideration into, instead of putting the turbine engine in a smaller, sportier car, putting it in a larger luxury car. And that might be that little extra hook that'll get people who are looking for, like, say, a big old Cadillac to go, something, I should go buy a big old Chrysler. And it's got this turbine engine in it. And it's got a different kind of sound, but it runs really smoothly. For the most part, it's really quiet. And yeah, you're spending extra money for it, but if you got that kind of money, you might not care. So there are possibly going to be advantages to Cadillac electrifying, because I've known people who owned Cadillacs who didn't drive that much. Usually because they acquired wealth as they got older, and when they were older, they had money, and they bought Cadillacs. And so it might be that there's an audience of people out there who are interested in buying these cars, and yeah, they don't drive a whole lot, but when they do drive, they want to drive something big and comfy and luxurious. And do they care if it's electric or not? They don't care. And when they find out that, like, oh, by the way, bring it home, plug it in, go for a drive later, you can skip going to the gas station altogether. Bonus. So it's interesting, but I was a little surprised when I heard how many of the dealers, about 150 out of almost 900, who decided to take the buyout rather than sell electric cars in the future. But it makes sense going forward that there are dealerships out in places where they don't move enough cars to make that investment infrastructure worthwhile. So Keith, thanks for the story. Out of the Detroit News, Kalia Hall and Brianna Noble wrote it, but widely reported, including the Wall Street Journal. Some Cadillac dealers choose not to invest for the EV future and instead decide to pull in the shingle. Questions, comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Live your life like you're the hero in your own movie.